a flight to Guatemala City. Kennedy gloated that he was very glad Marcelo is no longer with us. 2 months later, Marcelo was back in New Orleans. His lawyers filed suits against Robert Kennedy.
Marcelo had a deep sense of personal dignity, and Marcelo had every reason to hate and resent the way in which Kennedy had personalized this matter of business. Marcelo was the type of man who could have someone killed.
In 1962, Ed Becker, a Nevada entrepreneur and private investigator, was invited by a business associate to meet with Carlos Marcelo. Becker had Las Vegas friends in common with the Louisiana boss, and so agreed to meet him at his hideaway in the swamps.
He just took me out to this place. It looked like a farmhouse to me. And Carlos Marcelo put on some records, poured some scotch. We sat down, we started drinking, talking about Las Vegas. And I just started talking about Bobby Kennedy. And he's saying, yes, well, I was, lived here more years than Bobby Kennedy and the rest of the damn Kennedy family. And I said, yeah, but he didn't throw you out. Well, that was the one that started the little bomb going off inside of him. Now he's rage, and he's saying, well, they're not so smart. If they think they're smart, they're not so smart. Anything can happen to them. And I said, now I'm beginning to say, what does he mean anything can happen to him? So I said to Carlos, you're not saying you're going to get rid of Bobby Kennedy. If somebody gets rid of Bobby Kennedy, the whole government comes down on their head. And then he turned it right around and says, no, you cut off the head, the tail died. And I imagine it's an old Sicilian thing, where if you cut off the head of the dog, the tail is dead, all right? The president is the head, the tail is Bobby Kennedy. There was no doubt in my mind what he was saying.
Later in the conversation with Becker, Marcelo said that he would get a nut to do the job, someone with no clear connection to his organization. It was a time-honored practice of the Sicilian mafia. Next, we'll meet the volatile ex-Marine who became Marcelo's instrument for revenge, Lee Harvey Oswald, one of the most notorious figures in the history of American justice.
I was going to go to Mexico for spring break. I got a radiator instead.
I was going to buy my kid karate lessons, and then there was the clutch problem. Guess I'll be teaching him now.
I was going to buy a new computer.
I was going to buy a gorgeous new dress. Whoa! No one wants their plans sidelined by a car repair. And when your auto warranty expires, you're left paying for those repairs out of pocket. That's why there's Endurance. With an Endurance Vehicle Protection Plan, your repairs are covered, both parts and labor. So if your radiator blows, or your clutch goes out, or your engine gives up, you won't be stuck holding the bill. You could save thousands.
So I don't have to teach karate now?
You don't have to teach karate. Remember, insurance only covers you when you're in an accident. Endurance is the other half of protection, covering you when your car breaks down. Insurance plus endurance equals total protection.
Protect yourself against the high cost of auto repairs with Endurance. Call right now for a free quote.
My vehicle was sent 6 feet in the air in a ball of fire. I thought I was going to die.
It ripped my arm off. It broke my right femur.
I took such a hard blow to the head that my retina was torn apart.
Say a prayer for peace.
I'm Trace Adkins. I want to tell you about these true American heroes and how you can show your thanks by helping them through Wounded Warrior Project.
The Wounded Warrior Project has made a big difference in our life.
They reached out to us as a family. They reached out to my son, and they never forgot about us.
The job of helping thousands of our wounded warriors rebuild their lives is massive and growing every day. That's why your gift of just $19 a month is so important. Many of these service members suffer traumatic brain injury and post-traumatic stress disorder.
They helped me basically put my life back together.
If it wasn't for Wounded Warrior Project, I would be a statistic right now. I would have been one of those soldiers who came home and committed suicide.
I'm in the fields of Vietnam, the mountains of Afghanistan.
Your gift today of $19 a month can help us provide the programs and services desperately needed by our wounded service members. You'll honor and empower them so they can aid and assist each other.
They've personally impacted my life, and they've personally impacted thousands of lives.
Call or go online with a pledge of $19 a month and you'll receive this Wounded Warrior Project blanket.
There are so many men and women in the battlefield. The greatest casualty is being forgotten.
Please don't forget our wounded warriors. Make that call now.
Say a prayer for peace.
This is a special announcement for anyone in America currently faced with overwhelming financial pressures due to back taxes owed to the IRS or the state.
If you owe $10,000 or more to the IRS or other state agencies, tax resolution programs are now available that may help you deal with these problems and get your life back on track.
If you currently owe $10,000 or more in back taxes, if you're receiving collection letters from the IRS or a state tax agency, if you're being threatened with wage garnishment or a bank levy, or if you need to file years of late returns, well, time is not on your side. Take the first step toward resolution of these problems today by calling the Tax Relief Helpline now.
This is the perfect time to build a plan that can get your life back on track. So make the call to the Tax Relief Helpline now.
Call 1-800-507-9092. That's 1-800-507-9092.
Exactly what you saw, sir. He was coming down the street, and my 5-year-old boy and myself were by ourselves on the grass there on Palmer Street, and I waved to him, and Joe waved, and I waved, and the man, that's all right, sir. You were as he was waving back, the shot rang out, and he slumped down in the seat.
I have just talked to Father Oscar Hubert. He and another priest tell me that the pair of men have just administered the last rites of the Catholic Church to President Kennedy. President Kennedy has been assassinated. The president is dead.
Just 15 minutes after the shooting, the Dallas police radio broadcast a description of a suspect that closely matched that of Lee Harvey Oswald.
We received information he was in the Texas Theater. We went to this location, surrounded it from the outside, and then about 8 officers went into the location. Officer Enium McDonald was interrogating his third person when, as he approached him, the suspect jumped up, struck him in the face, and yelled, "This is it."
Full name is Lee Harvey Oswald, O-S-W-A-L-D.
The 24-year-old suspect worked at the Texas School Book Depository, the presumed source of the gunfire.
The mob picked Oswald because immediately deflected all suspicion from organized crime, because this guy led you everywhere else.
Lee Harvey Oswald had a curious history. At 17, he enlisted in the Marines, where he served as a radar operator. But the young private became increasingly disaffected with the inequities of American capitalism. He learned Russian and declared himself a Marxist. In 1959, he culminated his political transformation by defecting to the Soviet Union. During his 3-year stay, Oswald married a Russian woman, Marina Prusakova. By 1962, he became disillusioned with the inequities of Soviet life and returned to the United States. But he remained an avowed Marxist and became active in the pro-Castro Fair Play for Cuba Committee. Now charged with murder, an angry and defiant Oswald insisted he was being framed because of his radical politics.
Can we get one shot? Please.
I'd like some legal representation. These police officers have not allowed me to have any. I don't know what this is all about.
Kill the president?
No, sir, I didn't. People keep asking me that. Sir?
You're the president?
I work in that building.
Were you in the building at the time?
Naturally, if I work in that building, yes, sir.
Back up, man.
Come on,
man.
man. No, they're taking me in because of the fact that I lived in the Soviet Union.
Who killed John Kennedy? I don't have any doubt about it at all. Lee Harvey Oswald. Nobody who comes to the scientific and other evidence about Oswald's complicity can come to any other conclusion.
His rifle plainly and clearly was used to kill the president. And Lee Harvey Oswald plainly and clearly fired the rifle.
Oswald steadfastly denied his guilt, but he dropped enigmatic hints that he had associates, that he'd been manipulated.
I'm just a patsy.
If he was a patsy, who was using him, and where did they find him? Oswald was born and raised in New Orleans. His father died before Lee was born, but he could always rely on his favorite uncle, Charles Dutz Moret. Moret was a gambler and a longtime bookmaker in the criminal syndicate run by Carlos Marcello.
Lee did not have a father, and Dutz Moret was his surrogate father. It was to Dutz Moret that Lee turned when he was arrested for his Fair Play for Cuba activity, and it was people connected to Dutz who got him out, bailed him out. This was a man who gave financial and emotional support to the young Oswald family.
Upon arriving from the Soviet Union, the Oswalds settled near Dallas, but in the summer of 1963, broke and under marital stress, they temporarily relocated to New Orleans. The young couple received financial help from Moret and were frequent dinner guests in his home. Oswald saw his uncle weekly. For a time, he even worked for Moret, running numbers out of this mob-controlled restaurant. If Carlos Marcello was looking for a nut to kill Kennedy, his bookmaker's Marxist nephew was a convenient and highly visible candidate. And there were further links to Marcello. Oswald's base for his pro-Castro activities was an office at 544 Camp Street that was given to him by another Marcello associate, Guy Bannister. Bannister, a private investigator, was assisting Marcello with his ongoing fight against Robert Kennedy and the Justice Department. And there was yet another investigator on the Marcello defense team with connections to Lee Harvey Oswald, a part-time Bannister employee named David Ferry. Ferry, a one-time airline pilot, wore a wig and artificial eyebrows because of a disease which had caused the loss of his body hair. Ferry had known Oswald since the 1950s. On the 2 weekends prior to President Kennedy's assassination, David Ferry stayed at Marcello's headquarters in the swamps, ostensibly to work on Marcello's legal case. During the same period, witnesses report seeing Ferry together with Oswald. So there were clear associations between Oswald and Marcello. But if Oswald was really a pawn in a Marcello murder conspiracy, his precise method of recruitment remains a mystery.
I don't think it's credible that Marcello could have come to Oswald, the ex-Marine, and said, let's go kill the president. I think they would have had to come to him and elicit from him a favorable response by dealing with him on an ideological level, so that Lee Harvey Oswald would have thought of himself as acting in a conspiracy to kill the president in behalf of the Communist Revolution in general and the Communist Revolution in Cuba in particular.
On November 22, 1963, Carlos Marcello was in federal court in New Orleans facing immigration charges when he heard what for him must have been very good news. President Kennedy was dead. Just 2 hours later, the mafia boss was acquitted on all counts. But he and his associates soon heard a disturbing report. Oswald had been arrested.
After Kennedy was shot, the mob plan was to blame it on to Lee Harvey Oswald, to shoot down Oswald and make it appear that he'd been assassinated by some outraged citizen. The only problem with that is that the police got him first.
During the 48 hours following Oswald's arrest, a local Dallas mobster was seen on numerous occasions inside the Dallas Police Building on the same floor where Oswald was being held. The mobster's name was Jack Ruby.
A woman goes missing. Last seen with an unknown man. Her body found in the wilderness.
Skeletized remains.
Using the clues to find a killer.
We have no witnesses, no confessions. We have no murder weapons.
On Forensic Files, Thursday night, 7:30, 6:30 Central, on the new Escape, Slip Away. Thursday, on Unsolved Mysteries, one family holds a shocking secret.
Someday it's going to get me and kill me.
Why are they so electric?
Nobody wants to give me a ride home when it's raining out.
It's a full night of Unsolved Mysteries. Thursday, starting at 8, 7 Central, on the new Escape, Slip Away.
Hi, I'm Matt McCoy. How long have you had your car insurance? I ask because I had mine for over 20 years, before I switched and saved hundreds with the AARP auto insurance program from the Hartford.
I was with my previous insurance for 30 years, but they could not compete with the Hartford.
People 50 and over could save hundreds of dollars when they switch.
I had done a lot of comparison shopping. The rate was like half of what I was paying.
$404 is the average amount folks save when they switch to the AARP auto insurance program from the Hartford. You know, it makes me wonder why everyone 50 and over hasn't switched.
4 out of 5 AARP members who switch to the Hartford from companies like Allstate, State Farm, and Geico all get a lower rate with the Hartford. So call 1-800-684-6089 or go to gohartfordauto.com for your free quote. If you're not already an AARP member, the Hartford can help you join in minutes.
Let me tell you what else the Hartford does. They promise not to drop you, even if you're in an accident. It's called lifetime renewability, and it's included with your policy.
It's a great feeling to know that they're not going to drop you for that reason.
And if by chance you're ever injured in an accident, the Hartford has a benefit called Recover Care. This will help cover the cost of having someone do your grocery shopping, your house cleaning, lawn care, even walk your dog.
They were there when we got the insurance, and they were there when we needed it, and we really appreciate that.
Save $404 on average, get lifetime renewability, and Recover Care. Call the Hartford at 1-800-684-6089 now to request your free quote. That's 1-800-684-6089 or go to gohartfordauto.com today. Get this free calculator just for requesting a quote.
Drug or alcohol dependency can be a hard thing to come to terms with. It can affect your job, destroy your marriage, and ruin your life. If you or a loved one is struggling with addiction and finding it hard to take the first step, the Addiction Recovery Group is here to offer free help. We can help you with immediate admittance to a treatment center near you. And due to the recent changes in healthcare, your insurance may cover up to $30,000 in treatment costs with no out-of-pocket cost to you. Take that first step. Call now and get the help you need fast and confidentially. If you or a loved one is losing control due to drugs or alcohol, the Addiction Recovery Group is here to help. It only takes one phone call to start getting your life back to the way it was. The call is free and there's no obligation. Make today the first day of the rest of your life. Call now.
Call 1-800-775-6890. That's 1-800-775-6890.
At the moment President Kennedy was shot, his brother Robert, the Attorney General, was home on a lunch break from a special meeting with federal prosecutors about his war against organized crime. Later that afternoon, he told his aide, Edwin Guthman, "I thought they might get one of us, but I thought it would be me." Had it been the Mafia? Perhaps the strongest evidence of mob involvement came 2 days after the president's assassination, with the killing of Lee Harvey Oswald. For the man who shot him had spent his lifetime in the underworld.
Who is he? The suspect's name is Jack Rubenstein, I believe. He goes by the name of Jack Ruby.
On Sunday morning, November 24th, 1963, Jack Ruby, A 52-year-old nightclub owner shot and killed Lee Oswald in front of a live television audience numbering in the millions.
I think that the killing by Ruby of Oswald is the Rosetta Stone for the assassination. As soon as you understand that to be a stalking and you connect Ruby to organized crime, why would organized crime silence the assassin but to hide their own complicity in the assassination?
Jack Ruby was a mob guy killing Oswald on mob orders, period.
Ruby told police that he'd acted on a sudden emotional impulse to spare Mrs. Kennedy the pain of returning to Dallas for Oswald's trial.
I got an impression from him that he had been terribly upset by the president's death and that he had brooded over it.
But as even Ruby later admitted, that was a cover story. Silencing those who know too much is a traditional element of the Mafia's code of violence. And Jack Ruby's entire life was governed by that code. Ruby's mob associations date back to the 1920s. Growing up in a poor Jewish section of Chicago's West Side, he earned dollar bills running errands for Al Capone. Ruby was educated in the streets, where he learned to hustle for money and settle arguments with his fists. He drifted from one job to another, always living at the edge of the law. In 1947, by his own account, Ruby was exiled from Chicago on mob orders and forced to relocate to Dallas. There, he embarked on a new career as a strip club owner. To scout for new talent, Ruby often traveled to a New Orleans night spot called the Show Bar, which was owned and operated by the Marcello family. During the 1950s, Ruby made mob-connected trips to Cuba. There's evidence he acted as a courier for guns and illicit cash. And he may have played a role in mob efforts to secure the release from a Castro jail of the one-time Havana gambling boss, Santo Trafficante, the same man who predicted in 1962 that President Kennedy would be hit. In Dallas, Ruby developed ties to the local mafia boss, Joseph Civello, who functioned as the regional representative of Carlos Marcello. During the months just prior to the assassination, Ruby's telephone records connect him to mob figures all across the country, such as Louis McWillie, a former casino pit boss for Santo Trafficante, Irwin Weiner, a mob-linked money man in Chicago, and Naufio Pecora, a top lieutenant to Carlos Marcello. But from the mob's point of view, Ruby's most useful contacts were with the Dallas police.
The mob knew that Jack Ruby had access to the police. He was doing favors for the police. He was playing his old game of buddying up with them. He provided those who were interested with girls. He provided others with sandwich, others with booze. He was in and out of the police station all the time. He was the only mob member, low-ranking though he was, who had that kind of access. They had to use him. He was the only one available.
7 p.m., Friday, November 22nd. Ruby tried to enter room 317 of the Dallas Police Building, where Oswald is being questioned. Midnight Friday, Oswald appeared at a press conference with the district attorney.
A member of any communist front organization?
That I can't say at the present time.
Any organizations that he belongs to, you know of?
Well, the only one I mentioned was the Free Cuba movement.
But the district attorney misspoke. He meant to say, fair play for Cuba committee.
Or whatever that. Fair play. Fair play for Cuba.
Two voices called out the correction. One of them was Jack Ruby's. How much did he know about Oswald? The nightclub owner, who stood but a short distance from the prisoner, later admitted he had a gun in his pocket. 4 p.m. Saturday. News reporters again saw Ruby on the 3rd floor of the police building.
Somehow, Ruby was on a mission. It was not a spur-of-the-moment act on Sunday morning when he went over to the police station and suddenly killed Lee Harvey Oswald.
Jack Ruby spent his final years in prison. Whatever he may have known about a mafia conspiracy, he never revealed. In one of his last interviews before his death in 1967, Ruby said, "The world will never know the true facts of what occurred because, unfortunately, the people who had so much to gain will never let the true facts come out above board to the world." The day President Kennedy was killed, Jimmy Hoffa phoned his lawyer and said, "Did you hear the good news? They killed the son of a bitch." That same day in Tampa, Santo Trafficante drank a toast. He said, "Maybe now they'll get off Jimmy's back, get off Carlos's back, get off all our backs." His brother's assassination devastated Robert Kennedy. The Justice Department's war on the mafia ground to a halt. Carlos Marcello was never again deported. He died in 1993 at the age of 83. He outlived John Kennedy by 3 decades.
These are people who are used to killing and not talking, and who have nothing to gain by talking. These are people who do not share with their wives and their mistresses the subject of their business. If there was any group in the United States who could have done it and kept it quiet, it is precisely the mob.
If the mafia really killed John F. Kennedy, it may have been because it saw itself being double-crossed by a family it believed was deeply in its debt.
Joseph P. Kennedy was blessed with sons who had so much native talent and intelligence, so much to give to their country. The saddest thing is that Joseph P. Kennedy, in getting involved in so many shady deals with so many shady characters, was possibly passing a death sentence on his children.
There are many views of the Kennedy assassination. When the evidence is weighed, there are some who say the only plausible explanation is that the mafia did it. That organized crime, feeling double-crossed by both John and Robert Kennedy, retaliated by killing the president. But 3 decades after the fact, it's difficult to prove the mob theory beyond all reasonable doubt. Nonetheless, the tragedy in Dallas may be the most poignant example in our history of the awesome power of the mafia to potentially elude American justice and change history, and to destroy our most cherished hopes for the future. I'm Bill Curtis. Join us next time for another episode of American Justice. rise of the labor movement in the United States is a bloody story of violent strikes, lockouts, and pitched battles between fledgling unions and entrenched employers dead set against them. Gangsters forced their way in to provide muscle and protection for each side, which then accused the other of initiating violence. Once hired, the gangsters proved to be very hard to fire. The big new scam was called labor racketeering. It was the signature of the 1930s, as surely as prohibition had been of the 1920s. Labor racketeering meant exacting a payment or tribute in cash from unions or employers under the threat of violence.
Now all you have to do is pay tribute to the gang. And if you don't, all the gangsters have to do is wreck your business. A simple, reasonable arrangement, unless you become too objectionable. In that case, a representative from Consolidated Rackets Incorporated pays a routine business call.
New York's Lower East Side was fertile soil for the growth of both the labor movement and organized crime. Among the earliest underworld figures to lend muscle to the labor movement was Edward Monk Eastman. Known for his broken nose, cauliflower ears, and heavily scarred face and body, Monk Eastman provided thugs to hospitalize strikers or strike breakers, depending on who was paying the bill. Bellevue Hospital treated so many of Eastman's victims, the recovery wing was nicknamed Eastman Pavilion. New York's most notorious labor racketeer before Prohibition, the son of Jewish immigrants, was a young man named Benjamin Fine, who, because of a medical condition that kept his eyes half closed, was known to one and all as Dopey Benny.
Well, Dopey Benny was what was known as a Starker, which was the Jewish term on the Lower East Side for a gunman. He was a major player in the Union Wars on the Lower East Side at the time, and he worked for the unions in a variety of measures, attacking scabs, attacking people who were trying to break up demonstrations, threatening people to enter the union, and so forth.
Eyeing the endless stream of merchants, messengers, salesmen, and buyers thronging the overcrowded streets, Dopey began his criminal career on the Lower East Side as a pickpocket, a born entrepreneur. He even ran an informal school for would-be pickpockets. The law caught up to him while he was still in his teens. Dopey did time at the Elmira Reformatory in upstate New York, and when he got out, he turned his attention to the labor field. Where Monk Eastman had provided the occasional muscle, Dopey Benny turned strike protection into a full-time business.
He was a fellow who was very valuable on a picket line, because you don't monkey around with him. He was too big and too rough and adequately insensitive.
Dopey Benny's gang of toughs could take care of the company goons. He organized an all-woman gang as well, armed with razor-sharp hairpins and heavily weighted umbrellas, whose job was to persuade female workers to join the union. Rag pickers, umbrella and hat makers, butchers, bakers, and garment workers all relied on the dope from time to time.
He showed himself someone who was able to go beyond mere street violence and turn his services into something that would be a profit, both to himself and the unions.
Dopey himself explained his procedures in a deposition to the district attorney. My first job was to go to a shop and beat up some workmen there. The men that employed me gave me $10 for every man that I had to use, and $100 for myself. I got the men together, divided them up into squads, and saw that they were armed with pieces of gas pipe and clubs. And when the workmen came from work, my men picked them up. The dope even maintained a price list. $60 to shoot a scab in the leg, $200 for a broken arm, and as much as $500 for a life. As the New York Times put it, Dopey Benny placed the gangster business on an economical basis. Benny's annual income in 1912 averaged between $15,000 and $20,000, over $250,000 in today's currency. Drawn by the steady wages, New York's most ferocious hoods came to work for Benny, who now controlled virtually all of Lower Manhattan. Business was so good that smaller gangs combined to muscle in on Dopey's Lower East Side territory. To keep the peace, Dopey Benny divided up the city into wards, controlled by different gangs, long before Johnny Torrio had the same idea in Chicago. Charged with homicide in 1914, Dopey Benny Fine, America's first labor racketeer, became the underworld's first stool pigeon. His information led to charges against 11 gangsters and 23 labor leaders. After his confession, Dopey's control of the streets withered, and he gradually drifted into obscurity. His impact on organized crime, however, would endure.
Dopey Benny's gang was sort of like a school for gangsters on the Lower East Side. The racketeers who were quite prominent in labor racketeering in later years, who were the major player in that particular type of racketeering, Louis Lepke Buchalter of the garment industry and his sidekick Jacob Garage Shapiro, and Little Augie Organ, who most people haven't heard of because Lepke killed him rather early on. They were all graduates of Dopey Benny's gang.
Lepke would spearhead the great flourishing of labor rackets in all kinds of industries and unions. Garment workers, seafood workers, trucking, construction, hotel and restaurant workers' unions, all were feeling the hot breath of the mob closing in.
Into the Woolworth building, a stone's throw from City Hall, moved the young and able lawyer, Thomas E. Dewey, appointed special...
In response to the growing mob presence in virtually every industry, New York Governor Lehman brought in Thomas E. Dewey to try to break the grip of the racketeers.
With his other cases complete, Prosecutor Dewey rounds up more and more hitherto untouchable mob leaders.
Despite Tom Dewey's zealous ambition to curb racketeering, the 20th century labor wars opened up vast new territory to mafia influence and domination. Organized crime would move in on unions and employers nationwide, soaking up the wages and pension funds of union members, while extorting huge payoffs from businesses in return for labor peace. The mafia would take control of major international unions and find its way into executive boardrooms, as we'll see when American Justice returns with Target Mafia.
I work hard all day, and this is why. But taking care of my money has never been easy, until now. Brinks knows what's valuable to me, making it easy to keep track of my money and pay my bills on time.
Here's to the strong, to the dependable, to the trusted. Your family counts on you. Who can you count on? The Brinks Prepaid MasterCard. With direct deposit, you can get your paycheck or government payments up to 2 days faster.
I don't have time to wait for a paycheck, cash it, and then run around and pay bills. Brinks knows what's valuable to me. Time.
Call now or go online to get your Brinks Prepaid MasterCard today. There's no cost to order, and you're guaranteed approval. Easily load money onto your card, and then shop online, pay bills, buy groceries.
I get a text alert every time our card is used, so we always know our balance.
And we're protected from unauthorized transactions. Brinks gives us peace of mind.
With Brinks, you can easily and safely manage your money 24/7, online and with the mobile app.
I get cash back on everyday purchases. Brinks knows what's valuable to me. Saving money.
Call now or go online to get your Brinks Prepaid MasterCard today. There's no credit check and you're guaranteed approval. And with a qualifying direct deposit, we'll upgrade you to Brinks Preferred with extra benefits, including a savings account with a 5% annual percentage yield. Get paid faster with the Brinks Prepaid MasterCard. Manage your money anytime, anywhere, and get the peace of mind you deserve. Brinks knows what's valuable to you. Call right now to order your Brinks Prepaid MasterCard. Call 1-800-292-6720 or go online. There's no cost to order. Call now.
When Bob got into the accident, I was terrified. His injuries were so severe, but once we knew he was going to be okay, what then?
I couldn't go back to work for a long time, and we got way behind on our bills.
We'd hired an attorney, but when our case kept dragging on, we didn't know how we were going to get by. Thankfully, our attorney knew about Oasis Legal Finance.
Oasis looked at our case and got us the money the very next day.
but a relief it was. We didn't have to wait until our case settled, and the money from Oasis helped us when we needed it most.
At first I wasn't so sure. What if we lost the case? How would we be able to pay back Oasis? But then I found out if we did lose, we wouldn't have to pay them back. So there was no risk in doing it. No risk.
If you were involved in an accident and hired an attorney to fight for the compensation you deserve but need money now before your case settles, then call Oasis today. Oasis has given millions of dollars to people like you who need money fast while waiting for their case to settle. There's no risk, so call now.
I was hurt badly in a car accident just after my wife gave birth. We were counting on the cash from my lawsuit to get caught up, but the case took forever.
Honestly, we didn't know what we were going to do. Then we saw an Oasis TV commercial and called. We were approved and got money from Oasis the next day.
Not in a week, the very next day.
I was hurt at work and filed a workers' comp claim. I called Oasis and they gave me the cash I needed. Unfortunately, I ended up losing my case, but Oasis let us keep the money. They kept their promise, and we didn't need to pay them back.
There are no out-of-pocket costs and no payments until your case is settled. If you lose your case, you don't have to repay Oasis. There's no risk. Call Oasis now to see how much money you can get before your case settles.
Call now, 1-800-490-0049. 1-800-490-0049. 1-800-490-0049.
In its infancy, labor racketeering was a matter of scattered beatings, goon squads, and petty extortion. It would soon mature into a formal part of organized crime when major underworld gangs took control. Gangsters were on the lookout for industries and unions with corruptible leaders. Their first big scores were in the trucking, building trades, garment, longshore, and restaurant unions. In every case, it would be the rank-and-file members who would suffer most. The racketeers were after the big money, which led them inevitably to the docks. The International Longshoremen's Association was organized in the 1890s and soon gained total control of the waterfront. The ILA, in turn, was controlled by gangsters from the beginning. For decades, the Mafia had the New York waterfront in a stranglehold, and union organizers were taking their lives in their own hands. The sprawling port of New York was the jewel in the Union's crown. Thousands of tons of valuable goods were loaded and unloaded by Union longshoremen around the clock. Whoever controlled a union controlled the New York harbor, and thereby controlled millions of dollars in cargo. Huge ships lost money while tied up in port. They had to be loaded and get back out to sea. Likewise, immense cargoes of perishable goods would be lost overnight if left unloaded. A mob threat to slow down the loading process would always result in an ample payoff by ship owners. The Mafia bled some $350 million a year from the shipping industry and workmen. Traditionally, the Irish controlled the West Side docks in Manhattan, while Italian crime families owned the East Side and Brooklyn piers. The most notorious was Albert Anastasia, who slaughtered his way to the position of Mafia kingpin on the Brooklyn docks, underboss of Don Vincenzo Mangano. He became a longshoreman by age 16 and a murderer by 17. Italian mafioso Anastasia was supervised by none other than Jewish gang leader Lepke Buckhalter, who had an interest in the stevedore unions. A notorious killer, Anastasia was put in charge of Murder Incorporated by mob boss Vince Mangano. Albert Anastasia's power was reinforced by his brother Anthony Anastasia, who served as vice president of Local 1814 of the ILA. Millions of dollars poured into the mob's coffers through their vice grip on the union in stolen goods, kickbacks, and shippers' payoffs.
Still doing it today.
In 1920, Albert Anastasia murdered a longshoreman named Joe Torino. Sentenced to die in the electric chair, Anastasia stayed on death row at Sing Sing for nearly 2 years, until he won a new trial, at which all of the witnesses mysteriously reversed their testimony or vanished. Anastasia was back on the waterfront. To secure his power, Anastasia organized a group of killers who would later become known as Murder Incorporated. They included Pittsburgh Phil Strauss, Kid Twist Relis, Blue Jaw Magoon, Emmanuel Mendy Weiss, and Ali Tick-Tock Tannenbaum. Under mobster control, the New York waterfront was a frightening place to work. Ships pulled in at any time of day or night, in any kind of weather. Slings were overloaded and unwieldy. Men worked fast in dangerous conditions, where mutilations and fatal accidents were commonplace. Longshoremen couldn't hope for much help from their union. Joseph Patrick Ryan became president of the International Longshoremen's Association in 1927. Under his stewardship, organized crime's control of the union and the waterfront was ironclad. Ryan was a puppet of the mob and dipped into the pension fund for his own needs.
It was really a union in name only. It had no other characteristic of being a union.
In return for a fraction of the bribes paid to the mafia, Ryan guaranteed the shipowners there'd be no trouble from the longshoremen. In time, it just became a routine price of doing business. Workers' interests, of course, were ignored. Joe Ryan earned the nickname Nickel Joe for the 5-cent raises he occasionally bestowed. Despite the dangerous work and low wages, between 1919 and 1945, there were no major strikes to hit the New York waterfront. The mafia dictated whether and when a man worked by the shape-up, in which longshoremen were chosen at the whim of a mob-owned hiring boss who demanded a kickback from the workers he picked. So-called toothpick gangs were formed, made up of men who showed their willingness to kick back part of their meager day's pay by wearing a toothpick in their hatbands. Without the kickback, chances of working that day were slim.
And the walking boys would walk around and say, Carl, you, get in up here. Jackson, you, in up here. Bailey, get out of here. And stuff like that. And then when they had all the men they wanted, that's it, fellas, get out of here. There'll be no more until tomorrow, 8 o'clock in the morning.
The mob made money from every aspect of waterfront life. From the wealthy shippers to the poorest rank and filer, everybody paid the mob. A reign of quiet terror gripped the New York waterfront. Everybody knew the union was governed by gangsters who had a special branch, Murder Incorporated, that would kill to maintain their authority. A code of silence was obeyed by all. Longshoremen kept quiet and tried to avoid the accidents that inevitably befell anyone who dared challenge the supremacy of the mob. In 1939, an insurgent longshoreman was willing to risk the wrath of Albert Anastasia and the mafia. His story and more when American Justice returns with Target Mafia.
A woman goes missing.
She had a large amount of money and a ticket to Hawaii and was planning to go to Hawaii.
Last seen with an unknown man.
When the call stopped coming, then I thought something had happened.
Her body found in the wilderness.
Mostly skeletized remains of a human body.
Using the clues to find a killer.
We have no witnesses, no confessions. We have no murder weapons.
On Forensic Files, Thursday night, 7:30, 6:30 Central on the new Escape. Slip away.
Whatever happened to the family phone? The one that kept everyone connected. We made it better. Vonage, the home phone service for today. With Vonage, you can talk all you like for just $9.99 a month. And you'll get our new low per-minute international rates to use at home or on the go. Unlimited nationwide calling for just $9.99 a month for a full year. That's a 60% savings.
Call 1-888-523-4151 or go online now.
Are you being denied credit or paying high interest rates? Your credit score could be the problem. You need Credit Repair Pros, where we work directly with the credit bureaus and your creditors to challenge inaccurate information on your credit report to help you transform your credit score into the one you need to get the things you want, like a new car, a new home, even